Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving deep into a period of, well, intense conflict, the Cyprus emergency in the late 1950s.
Right.
We've gathered a stack of sources focusing specifically on the experiences of British individuals caught up in it, particularly an Army officer, Hal Treherne, and his wife, Clara.
Right. The material gives us a really vivid picture. It's a mix of personal accounts, descriptions of the events, and, reflections on what this time actually did to the people living through it.
Yeah. Our mission here is to get past the headlines and understand the reality of what these sources describe as a small war.
Mm.
We'll explore its effect on Hal and Clara and how it profoundly challenged their ideas about duty, morality, and, well, even themselves. It's a deep dive into conflict and its human fallout.
So let's start at the beginning, or maybe the beginning of Hal's military journey, as presented in the sources. It's 1946, the Sovereign's Parade.
Oh.
Picture this scene. Austere, traditional, full of emotion. Even though it's officially peacetime, the ceremony feels intensely serious, as if, the sources say, these men would be dispatched immediately into battle.
Wow. So that feeling of duty, of readiness, it wasn't just accepted, it was kind of expected then.
Exactly. It was deeply ingrained.
And that sense of duty runs deep for Hal Treherne, doesn't it? We hear about his father, a veteran, getting quite emotional watching Hal on parade.
Yeah, choked up, the sources say.
And Hal himself feels this pull, a desire to please his country, and even this hazy, humble idea of God. He sees the young princess walking the line, this embodiment of the country, and feels he must always do his best for her. That sense of purpose, that clear line of duty, it seems really foundational for him here.
Definitely. And it's right there, amidst this ceremony steeped in tradition and expectation, that he meets Clara Ward.
Oh, okay.
The sources describe this immediate, sort of overwhelming connection for Hal, like a foreign country, when he felt he'd always known, like the country's colored pink on the atlas. She was India.
Wow, that's intense. An intense description for an intense day, I suppose.
Absolutely. And their backgrounds offer a really interesting contrast, setting up different perspectives on military life right from the start.
How so?
Hal's family home near Warminster is described as dark gray, stoic, chilly, but nourishing to him, with its silent mealtimes and bare boards, a place of quiet strength and accepted tradition.
Okay. Stoic, traditional.
Compare that to Clara's home, a light village house, described as jolly, messy. Her father, George Ward, he's a civil servant who served in World War I and apparently hated soldiering.
Right.
He dreaded his son going into the army and his daughter marrying a soldier. Yet, surprisingly, the sources say this strong distaste was mixed with a pride that was almost beyond his control.
That's fascinating. So very different from Hal's father, Arthur Treherne, who seems to carry his military past with maybe quiet satisfaction.
Exactly. You see the seeds here, the conflicting feelings about service, right from the beginning.
Hmm. And their courtship before Cyprus is described as, what, 4 years of engagement? A long days of need, punctuated by short visits and intense, frustrated moments of kissing.
Yeah, the sources paint that picture. Clara's family sees Hal as this tall, cool-faced young soldier, clearly a bit uncomfortable in their messy civilian world, but needing Clara badly enough.
So they come from these different worlds, but they converge under the banner of Hal's military career.
Precisely. Now, fast forward 10 years later, it's January 1956, and they're arriving in Cyprus. The emergency is well underway.
Right. So Clara arrives by ship in Limassol with their 2 daughters, Meg and Lottie. Sounds like she had a rough voyage. Not a good sailor.
No, seems not. Hal, who flew in from Krefeld, apparently had an easier time.
And what's the atmosphere like on the ship for Clara?
Well, she's among an odd assortment of people. She encounters this Welsh businessman who seems almost, well, gleeful in trying to frighten them with stories of EOKA's terrorist atrocities, making it sound like a proper war zone.
Oh, dear. How does Clara react?
She tries to downplay it, saying, it's hardly the Blitz, is it? Trying to cling to a sense of normal, perhaps. Or maybe just trying to feel braver.
Yeah, understandable. But that sense of normal must be immediately challenged when they land.
Oh, definitely. The sources paint a picture of civilians sort of clustered together, surrounded by these noisy, desperate to be on land national service soldiers. Clara is trying to manage the girls in the drizzle, feeling completely out of place.
Must have been overwhelming.
You'd think so. They settle into a rented house near the harbor. Hal mentions that things have been a bit quieter recently, but the material makes it pretty clear this quiet is fragile and very temporary.
Right. So what the sources really underline then is the nature of this conflict. It's often called a small war, but it sounds like it was fought with brutal, very personal tactics.
Absolutely. We hear about EOK using makeshift bombs made from things like car exhausts and food tins, set with timers and tripwires.
Crude but effective, I suppose.
And deadly. And there's the chilling detail of piano wires stretched across roads to decapitate soldiers, which led to the military fitting poles to vehicles to counter it.
God, that's horrific. Just a constant low-level threat impacting daily movement.
Exactly. And the resistance wasn't confined to specific areas either. Even up in the hills, village houses are covered in graffiti, often poorly spelled English, mixed with Greek slogans like British out, EOKA, Eleftheria, Athanatos, freedom or death, Enosis union with Greece.
So this wasn't an enemy in uniform. It was often hidden within the population, just blending into the landscape.
Precisely. Which made things incredibly difficult, and the landscape itself is almost an adversary for the military operations.
How do you mean?
Trucks struggling up steep, wet roads, tires skidding, trying to navigate villages built right into the sides of hills. Places like Mondri village or approaching a farmhouse in a steep valley described as a dark crack in the earth. It highlights how difficult and disorienting the terrain made everything.
So it's a messy, physical struggle against an enemy you often can't see in a really challenging environment.
That's it. And this constant tension, the nature of the conflict, it inevitably leads to specific incidents that profoundly impact the characters. Incidents the sources describe in vivid, often quite disturbing detail.
Okay, like what?
Well, take the village search. Hal is on with Lieutenant Greaves and Corporal Kirby. They go into a bar to find the headman. Then villagers are herded into the square and guarded by soldiers.
Right.
And the sources note the soldiers answered in English, as you might talk to animals, conciliatory and threatening at the same time.
Wow. That says a lot.
It does. And Hal's internal reaction to Greaves is revealing too. He finds him too civilized for soldiering, and it irritates him. It suggests a friction between the, expected hardness of military life and the reality of dealing with civilians.
A difficult line to walk.
But the Limassol Street incident is particularly jarring. A chase, the slowest man gets cornered, and soldiers are just laying into him, kicking him. This isn't distant combat. It's brutal, close-quarters violence.
And this is where Lieutenant Davis becomes a crucial witness, right?
Exactly. He sees the door open, a mother and daughter screaming, trying desperately to pull the man inside. The soldiers push them back with gun butts in hands.
Just awful.
And what Davis witnesses and later recounts, it shakes him deeply. He describes it as a crime committed by British soldiers, a murder, and rape. Some women.
He uses those words, murder and rape.
He does. He doesn't shy away from the graphic detail. The torture of women, the easy killing of the man who was not a threat, the degraded collusion of the soldiers excited by their violence. It's a really stark moment in the sources, highlighting the breakdown of discipline and, well, humanity under pressure.
It sounds like it. Are there other examples?
Yeah. The sources also recount other violent events, illustrating the sort of indiscriminate nature of the conflict. The police station burning, where 2 Turkish Cypriot policemen and a Royal military policeman are killed, and another Turkish Cypriot officer loses his legs.
So multiple groups targeted.
Yes. The sources frame this as a double victory for EOKA then. Both Turks and British successfully targeted, showing the complexity of the political landscape where different groups were caught in the crossfire.
Right. And you mentioned other things earlier, like a cave siege.
Yes, there's the intense cave siege where Hal experiences this strange ecstasy of watching during the action, only to be haunted later by fragmented, traumatic images, blue sky, rock falls, black smoke, smelling of bodies and burned hair.
That sounds like PTSD, even if they didn't call it that then.
It certainly reads that way. Or the beach bombing that leaves horrific scenes with pieces of man and horse, huge splashes of blood. It's this combination of routine tension and sudden visceral violence that defines the emergency as depicted in these sources.
And these incidents, the constant threat, witnessing brutality, they must take an immense toll on the individuals, challenging everything they thought they knew about duty, justice, themselves.
Immense. Davis is clearly struggling after what he saw. When he talks to the Clara, he's physically distressed, described as sweaty, crying, no communication, shut in the car.
Understandably.
He's questioning the point of it all, saying if he reports it, it's just punishment. It's just a game, back and forth. He's vulnerable, admits, I want to go home, but he holds on to the ideal Hal represents, telling Clara, Hal says you should always be able to go to your commanding officer.
So he still has faith in the system, or at least in Hal.
It seems so. He trusts Hal, asking her, "What's he like, your husband?" And Clara's response, "Try him." It sets up this critical moment.
And does he confide in Hal?
Yes. When Davis tells Hal, describing the crime, Hal tries to maintain a professional, cool demeanor and effort of will for Davis's benefit, wanting to offer the comfort of military professionalism.
Trying to do the right thing by Davis.
But internally, that coolness had been a sham. He's deeply shaken, wishes he did not know, feels he's crossed a boundary, and realizes with a shock that he did not know he was such an innocent.
Despite everything he's seen already.
Apparently so. But despite his internal turmoil, he immediately starts making notes that instinctive procedure kicks in, even as his world is rocked.
But when Hal takes this to Colonel Burroughs, the commanding officer, the reality of the system's response is, well, you said devastating.
It is. Burroughs calls it a tricky business, dismisses the possibility of getting concrete evidence, and really shockingly, equates the rape to shoplifting, given there's a brothel on every other corner.
Equates rape to shoplifting, seriously.
That's what the source material recounts. He focuses on the operational challenges, saying being in town made it difficult to keep tabs, and the men were pretty worked up.
Excuses, basically.
Hal is internally furious, recognizing Burroughs' responsibility. They were your bloody orders and they were sloppy too. But Burroughs cuts him off, telling him to see to it, which Hal understands as managing the situation to prevent blame, specifically protecting someone like Mark Innes.
So it's not about justice at all. It's about reputation and damage control.
Exactly. A clear clash with the ideals Hal holds.
And what happens with the soldiers involved, Frank and Miller?
When Hal questions them, their reaction underscores the moral rot. They respond with confident bluster, denying Davis was there or that women were involved, using boilerplate justifications like reasonable force or claiming the man was coming at me.
Of course.
And in that moment, Hal has this sudden memory of Frank ransacking a house earlier, and it hits him with force. He had known Frank was dangerous. He ought to have checked him. He ought to have done something.
Oh, that adds another layer. A failure of his own oversight.
Right. Combined with the system's refusal to act, it just adds to his internal burden.
So what's the final outcome of this incident? The summary hearing?
Pretty much inevitable given Burroughs' attitude. Burroughs states military law requires more evidence than the accusations of one man, and mentions that others were asked to speak to Davis, clearly implying pressure was put on Davis to discredit him, or that he was isolated.
Covering it up.
Seems so. Hal has a rare, frustrated outburst, yelling, "This whole mess, this cover-up came from you. This wasn't some infraction of the rules to be overlooked and indulged."
Good for him, but probably didn't help.
No. Burroughs shuts him down completely. We'll say no more about it. And Hal realizes in that moment that Burroughs understood Davis's fear and vulnerability and used it, which explains the dismissiveness. The system failed, and Hal witnessed it firsthand.
Just a complete breakdown of the ideals he started with.
Completely. And the personal impact extends beyond these specific moral compromises. The sources show the immense toll on Clara, too, who isn't directly involved in operations but lives with the constant pervasive fear of the emergency.
Right, she's living there with the kids. How does it affect her?
Her fear becomes almost imaginative. The sources say she sees imaginary Cypriot eyes upon her, constantly checking for tripwires when she walks, expecting the car to blow up, every ordinary sound having a sinister interpretation.
That sounds exhausting.
She feels EOKA had terrified her. And this terror is a daily reality, not just a reaction to one event. It permeates everything.
And this fear and the stress of the situation, it must put a huge strain on her marriage.
Oh, absolutely. Hal is exhausted, preoccupied, and often dismissive when she tries to articulate her fears. He says things like, "There's nothing to be nervous about."
Which probably doesn't help at all.
No. There's a painful moment described at the mess where he tells her it isn't the right time to talk about this, preferring her to go home, to remove her from the situation rather than facing it together.
Pushing her away.
Yeah. She feels isolated, watched by the other officers' wives, Deirdre and Susan, and seeks out Davis just to understand what Hal is going through, noting, "You see more of him than I do."
That's sad. The disconnect is growing.
And then there's the pregnancy. She realizes she's pregnant, a feeling she remembers from the twins. But she'd been sort of lying to herself about the possibility.
In that environment, I can understand the denial.
This new life feels incredibly vulnerable. She feels it assumed her protection, but she feels unable to provide it, that she wasn't the strong cradle it needed. She even has this heartbreaking thought of the embryo reading her thoughts and knowing it's unwelcome.
Oh, that's awful. It really highlights how deeply the fear and instability have penetrated her sense of self and safety.
It does. And then the sources bring us to the bombing in Nicosia, a shocking, sudden event.
What happens?
Clara hears screams, sees someone named Gracie fall. She feels heat, but no pain initially. Then her vision is splashed with black, seeing her hand and dress covered with blood falling without feeling it.
My God.
The aftermath is described with stark clarity. Clara is hospitalized with a severe injury. The sources are explicit. The baby was dead inside her with a bullet in it.
Oh no, the baby she was just realizing she was carrying.
Exactly. Hal is there, his distress palpable. He describes her room as a nightmare, empty room, watching her small breath, overwhelmed by the feeling that he had deserted her by bringing her there and failing to protect her.
The guilt must have been crushing.
And this is a real turning point for Hal. The sources detail his own internal breakdown following this. The professional coolness just collapses into sick fear and shame, feelings described as new to him.
So it finally breaks through his reserve.
Completely. The focused intensity of moments like the cave siege, that ecstasy of watching, is replaced by haunting, fragmented images. He needs to get back to Clara, gets drunkenly emotional in the mess, experiences physical symptoms like shaking when he sees Greaves' white face connecting the trauma of the bombing back to the unresolved horror of the street incident.
It's all catching up with him.
Yes. And in a moment of rage and stress, he handles Clara roughly when he returns. The source notes he had hurt her, there would be blue bruises later, but it's immediately followed by profound remorse, kneeling and saying, "I'm so sorry."
Wow. The pressure has finally broken something deep inside him.
It seems so. The sources then follow the consequences of this breaking point and the long road home.
How do things unfold after that?
Clara and Hal talk about the pregnancy after the assault, but the dialogue is described as stilted and unnatural, as if they had studied their words earlier.
Awkward, disconnected.
Very. Hal suggests she go back to England for her and the girl's sake, finally admitting things have been pretty rough around here recently. An understatement, surely.
Yeah, you think. So she goes back.
Yes. After her hospital stay and recovery, Hal tells her she's leaving that very day. She gets this sudden look of life, asking, "Going home today?"
A flicker of hope, maybe.
Perhaps. At the RAF base, Hal insists he's traveling with them, going against the manifest. But Corporal Kirby intervenes, saying, "Sir, you're not going, sir."
So he can't go with them.
No. Ultimately, Hal puts Clara and the girls on the plane alone and watches them go. The source describes his sharp falling realization of what he had done, understanding the magnitude of sending them away, maybe acknowledging he can't protect them there, or maybe that he can no longer be the man who could.
A heavy moment. What does Hal do then?
This leads to Hal leaving Cyprus unofficially. He just disappears. He shows up at his parents' house in Warminster.
Goes AWOL, essentially.
Pretty much. Major Jameson visits, looking for him because he's officially absent from duty. Clara and her parents are shocked to learn he wasn't on official experience, leave another disconnect between the reality and the expected procedure.
So he's in serious trouble now.
Deep trouble. Then comes the court-martial process. Meeting Brigadier Bryce Stevens, the questioning. Hal remains mostly silent, refusing to cooperate in the way they expect.
Just shuts down.
Seems like it. Bryce Stevens lays out the charge directly. Am I to understand, then, that you walked out on your fellow officers and your company, leaving them in a time of crisis, and when absent, avoiding your duty with no intention of returning, and that you have nothing whatever to say in your own defense?
That's blunt. How does Hal respond?
Hal's quiet answer is powerful in its simplicity. "No, sir, I am. I am cooperating."
What does he mean by that?
It seems he isn't defending himself by the rules of the system anymore. His refusal to speak, his acceptance of the consequences, is his form of cooperation with something else, perhaps his shattered conscience, or just the truth as he now sees it.
Wow. There's also an interview with a doctor, right, Dr. Tate?
Yes, a different kind of assessment.
Yeah.
The doctor asks about Hal's symptoms, sleep issues, memory loss, the lingering smell of burning bodies, temper problems, feeling changed.
All classic signs of trauma.
Absolutely. But Hal is reluctant, denying or downplaying everything, saying things like, "I'd rather not say," or "no more than the average person." He insists he hasn't been in any battles, just the most trivial, facing nothing much, routine, one or two incidents, small wars, comparing it dismissively to his father or grandfather's experiences in bigger wars.
Trying to diminish his own experience.
But Dr. Tate sees the tremendous mental strain, and Hal finally offers this raw, unmasked plea that really cuts to the heart of his conflict. I will not say a word against the army. Do you think they know that?
God, that's heartbreaking. Still loyal, even after everything.
It shows his deep, conflicting loyalty to the institution that in many ways broke him.
What's the final outcome for him?
The outcome is Hal's discharge. He feels baseless, back at his parents' house, feeling like a child again, stripped, without any other parts of his adulthood.
Starting over, but not really.
Yeah. He has a difficult conversation with his father, acknowledging the difficulty, the uncertainty about the future. Can't think what, can you?
Yeah.
Walking through the house, looking at portraits of old soldiers, he has this profound realization. It was not for him anymore. He was not one of them, and he could not serve. The ideals of 1946 are completely gone.
A total break. What about Clara?
Clara also recovers and returns home, similarly feeling like a child again in her parents' house. They have a phone call, Hal and Clara, and agree to meet in London.
Okay, how does that meeting go?
That London meeting is set against the backdrop of news about the Suez Crisis, playing on a public screen, the big war happening elsewhere, starkly contrasting with their own small, dirty struggle.
Adds perspective, I guess.
Maybe. It's awkward between them, they talk about the past, but Clara shows this remarkable resilience. She thinks to herself, she wasn't dead. She wasn't frightened. She felt quite strong.
She's found strength through it all.
It seems so. She has gained a perspective where she could see their lives from above, all leading to this room, and then after this carrying on. A sense of continuation, maybe.
And there's a final scene described at a church.
Yes, at a church it's implied to be a funeral for Gracie, the woman killed in the Nicosia bombing. Hal leaves early, maybe overwhelmed by the military ceremony.
Understandable.
He goes back to the empty family home, finds a moment of solace in the small details of nature outside an oak tree, acorns, new leaves, just grounding himself perhaps. Eventually he returns to the church, rejoining Clara and the girls.
He goes back.
He goes back. They share a hymn book, a simple act of connection, and they examine each other in silence, the sources describe, feeling no barrier, no sea, no act committed, not so much as a pane of glass.
A moment of quiet understanding.
It seems like it, and Clara smiles at him. It's a quiet, maybe uncertain moment of potential repair after everything they've endured.
Wow. What a journey. So bringing all these threads from the sources together, what do we really see here?
Well, it's definitely not the clear-cut heroic story often associated with military service, is it? It's one of ambiguity, really difficult choices, and the messy, often disturbing reality of conflict, even a so-called small one.
Yeah, it really forces you to look at duty and morality differently. Hal's initial clear sense of purpose is just completely challenged, isn't it? By the realities he witnesses, the breakdown of discipline, the system's failure to uphold justice.
Absolutely. And you see the different reactions. Davis struggles, Burroughs rationalizes away brutality, soldiers like Franck act with casual violence. The small war just blurs lines. It seems so clear back at that parade ground in 46.
And the psychological cost is immense. But it's not just the visible trauma of a major battle, is it? It's the cumulative effect of the constant tension, the unexpected violence, witnessing injustice, feeling betrayed by the system, and the personal losses.
Exactly. The sources show trauma manifesting in different ways. Clara's pervasive fear, Hal's suppressed symptoms, and his eventual breakdown. It leaves these deep, lasting wounds, both physical and psychological.
And it impacts their relationship so profoundly. The stress just fractures their marriage, isolates Clara in her fear, and changes Hal fundamentally. The pressure of the conflict permeates every aspect of their lives.
Yeah, it's a powerful contrast between the public face of the military, the parades, the uniform, the stated ideals of duty, and the chaotic, often ugly reality of the conflict described in these personal accounts. Hal's journey is, in many ways, the shattering of that initial ideal.
Ultimately, these sources reveal that a conflict labeled small can have immense life-altering consequences for the individuals caught in it. Hal's feeling that his experiences weren't significant compared to bigger wars is perhaps part of the trauma itself. The system doesn't always acknowledge the full human cost of these kinds of struggles.
Right. So to sum up, this deep dive into these sources has given us a powerful look at the human experience during the Cyprus emergency through the eyes of Hal and Clara. We've explored the initial sense of duty, the descent into violence and injustice, the strain on their personal lives, and the profound fallout.
These accounts reveal that even in smaller conflicts, the cost is immense, challenging core beliefs and leaving deep physical and psychological wounds. Duty, morality, and justice become complex, sometimes irreconcilable forces.
It really makes you consider how these themes of duty, trauma, and the struggle to find meaning in difficult circumstances resonate far beyond this specific historical setting,
Yeah.
How do people cope when the world they expected or believed in just falls apart?
Yeah, and how do we navigate situations where what feels right and what is officially sanctioned seems inseparable, but one might have to be sacrificed?
Yeah,
It's tough.
really tough.
And it leaves us with this final question, I think, building on Hal's journey from that parade ground. What does it truly take for someone who has felt so deeply connected to a system or institution like the Army for Hal to reach a point where they just cannot serve anymore? What happens when personal conscience and institutional demands collide in a way that breaks a person's ability to continue?